One way I have found, especially with the Power Platform products, is the best way to learn is watching videos. So I definitely recommend checking Reza's YouTube channel. Along with Reza, we also have a lot of champions from community like Shane Yang, Daniel Christian, then some Microsoft folks like John Levesque and also April. So definitely check out their YouTube channels. They have tons of great contents. So in this talk, we'll be talking about implementing Microsoft Team Governance using Power Automate, Microsoft Graph APIs, and SharePoint. So who am I? I will quickly skip this one because we lost close to 5 minutes. So I am from Washington, D.C. area. And I am Microsoft MVP in AI. And I just changed my category to AI 2 years before. Previous to that, I was MVP in Office 65 apps and services. So this is the quick introduction of our company. We have two Microsoft MVPs on the staff, and we have done 100 plus Microsoft cloud deployments. And we have 50 consultants dedicated to Microsoft ecosystem. And we are providing services in Microsoft ecosystem some last 17 years. And we are actively hiring. So if you know anyone who's looking for a position in US or in India, definitely reach out to me. And I run a couple of or four meetups. A couple of them are on AI and machine learning. One is on SQL and big data, and third one is on Office 65. And we periodically organize a lot of community events. So do check us out on meetup.com to get to know the latest and greatest information about upcoming events. So this is going to be the agenda for this talk. We'll be talking about the key components of Microsoft Teams, and then we will talk about the Microsoft Teams governance. By the way, Raz, I'm seeing your screen. Is everyone seeing my screen where I'm sharing the deck?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I got confused because I have Teams client open in another screen, and all I'm seeing is your screens. Okay, that's good.
Thanks.
So we'll talk about what are some of the options we have when it comes to provisioning Teams. And then we will talk where Microsoft Graph APIs can help us. We'll talk about Power Automate. We'll also talk about Logic Apps because not many people familiar, but there is really good uh, correlation exists between the Power Automate and Logic Apps, and we'll talk about that. We will have demos, key takeaways, and Q&A. So I am using two screens. So make sure, like, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, ask that, or you can post your questions in the chat window, and I will be periodically monitoring that. So when it comes to Teams, and we are using Teams right now for this wonderful global conference. So we get this standard functionality, right? We have the chat, we have Teams and channels, we get meetings, we get voice, and we also have apps, bots, and connectors. Now, when it comes to apps, bots, and connector, it is up to you. Once you create a team, what kind of apps you would like to add. If you have a bots, you can also integrate bots with the teams, and you can also integrate third-party connectors. When it comes to the teams, what we have seen is since COVID-19 pandemic has started, the usage of products like Teams or Zoom have skyrocketed. And what happens is not many companies were ready for its implementation or its adoption. And what we have seen is a lot of companies just started using it because they just had like a window of 1 week where everyone has to start working remotely and everyone should be able to then get their work done remotely. That includes the telephones, the video conferencing, the screen shares. And some companies were ready for it. That means they had a good infrastructure and IT policies around it. But some companies were in the process of launching Teams or they didn't have a proper governance. And what happened is the usage of Teams has skyrocketed, but along with that, they also brought a lot of governance issues. And one of the ways to solve the governance issues with the Teams is using automated governance. So when you use automated governance, it ensures the consistency. That means we can use governance to have a proper naming convention for your teams. We can also use governance to have a proper templates. That means whenever a new team gets created, it has some predefined list, predefined channels, and some other settings already included. So that way, the end user or doesn't have to worry about all those stuff. It also empowers the end users. Like what happens is, so when it comes to creation of teams, you can either turn that on for everyone in your organization, or you can turn on that for few selected people. And depending on your audience or depending on your user base, some companies prefer one option over another. So if you have automated governance and for some reason you don't want your end users to create teams as they wish, you can also implement automated governance where you can provide some kind of interface to your end users where they submit a form, and that form can be built using a variety of technologies. And once the form is submitted, then the request goes through a proper approval. And if the request gets approved, then the team gets created properly with proper naming convention and also with proper governance options. So that definitely helps empower the end users. And one of the biggest advantage of going automated or using automated governance is it reduces the admin overhead. Since COVID-19 pandemic has started, if you talk with any admin department, they will tell you that admin or IT help desk is the number one department which is really getting burned out, because some companies were ready for remote work, but some companies were not. And the companies where the employees are not ready for remote work, they needed a lot of help, and they still need help. And IT is always overwhelmed with support requests. So if you if you consider automated governance, it will help you tremendously to reduce the admin overhead. Now, what are some of the things we can do when it comes to the automated governance in Microsoft Teams? One is we can implement retention policies where when a team gets created, you can specify how long that team can be active, and then you can have some policies around it. If you don't want all your users to create the teams, because if they don't know what they're doing, they may just create the teams by random, and suddenly you will have like 50 or 60 teams per user. And trust me, I have seen this kind of scenarios. So there you can use security groups where if you are a member of security group, then only you can create a team. Rest of the users will not be able to create that. You can have expiration policies. You can also have team naming policies. Now, when it comes to the team naming policies, it's extremely important that you in your organization have some kinds of policies around naming the teams, because it helps you to keep track of what kind of different teams are there. And one thing not many people aware, especially if they are not coming from Office 65 or SharePoint background, is whenever you create a team, along with that, you get an Office 65 group, and you also get a SharePoint online site collection. So for example, if the teams are really new, if you're rolling out teams in your organization and someone is testing it, and by mistake they created a team name HR, and they just forgot it and they just keep lying there. And then when the times come when the HR group actually wanted to create a team with HR, guess what? That name for the team, the Office 65 group and SharePoint Online site collection is already taken. So that means they have to go with some other name. Another way where Teams naming policies can help you is if you are using Teams for collaboration and you are collaborating with external users, and your organization allows you to collaborate with external users, then if you are creating a team where you will be sharing contents internally as well as some external partners, then you can have a proper naming convention, so that by just looking at the name you will know whether that team has is shared with external users or not. We use that internally a lot, where we use Teams not only for internal collaboration but also to collaborate with our clients. And whenever we create a client facing team, we start the name as external. So that way, by just looking at the name of the team, I will know that, hey, some other employees of other corporations can access this team. So I will need to make sure I'm not putting any sensitive data in it, or I'm not discussing any sensitive information inside the team's conversation. You can have expiration policies, and out of the box we can set this, and the owners of the team get then periodic notification, and during that notification they have option of either renew the usage of the team, or they can just let the team expire. And let's say, for example, you only have one owner for a team, and that owner is not available for some reason. He's on vacation, or he forgot to take action on this expiration notification, and the team got deleted, but you wanted to have the team active. Then admins have up to 30 days for to restore that team. Now here, one thing is very important is whenever you are creating a team, make sure you have multiple owners. So that way the management of the team and other stuff, you are offloading to other people, and you are not the only one who's the bottleneck there. We can also have the security group for the team's creation, where here there are two different kind of philosophies you will be seeing. If you ask Microsoft, the Microsoft philosophy is everyone should be empowered to create anything, any new product that is getting rolled out. However, some IT departments or some companies prefer a controlled rollout, where they want to first train their users, they want to first make sure they understand what this product does, and then they want to enable that product. So if you are in the latter part, then you can do that, where you can restrict who can create a team by using a specific security group. And let's say if I'm a member of the security group, then only I can create a team. Rest of the users will not be able to create that. However, when it comes to some of this automated governance option, you may need added license. And depending on what kind of license you have to access Teams, what kind of Microsoft 65 license you have to access Teams, some of these options may or may not be available to you. For example, you need Azure AD Premium Plan 1, which helps you to have team naming policies, expiration policies, and have security groups for Teams Creator. And you need Office 65 Enterprise E3 and above for creating retention policies. Now, some of these may already be included in your license. Some of them may not. So what if some of these options are not included in your Office 65 license? What if you are taking E1 license, or maybe other kind of licenses which are available for education or for nonprofit, where some of these options are not available? So this session is geared towards that, like how using Power Automate and how using Microsoft Graph API, we can build some automation where we don't have to rely on some of the out of the box of capabilities that we get, which comes with added license. Now, Teams template, not many people are aware, but we have a concept of Teams template in Team, where you'll have a pre-built definition for a team, including the channels and app. And these are the different properties that are supported right now. We can specify what's the base template. We can specify the team name, the description, the visibility, whether the team is going to be public or private. We can also have team settings like and we can also have installed apps and pin tabs. These are some of the things which are not supported yet, but most likely the support for this will get added sooner than later. And if you are coming from a SharePoint background, the Teams template works on the same line as SharePoint templates, where you create a template which is going to be your reference template, and the new site that you will be creating actually then try to mimic the structure of your reference template, so that whenever something new is getting created, your users don't have to think what else they have to add. A lot of things are already predefined for them. So that way they can just start using it right away. Now, when it comes to the templates, these are the templates that are available in Teams. We have standard, which is the default one. Whenever you use user interface to create a team, you like if you don't if you use the standard one, you just get a team with a general channel. We also have this other templates like education class team, staff team, PLC team, retail store, healthcare, and you can also create your own template as well. That means I can have my customized template where I will configure what kind of channel should be there, what kind of tab should be there, and then what kind of custom app should be added. And then I can use that as a reference. And whenever a new team is getting created, then I will be basically having a similar structure in the new team as well. So here, what we'll be doing is we'll be creating a simple application, and I'm not going to be covering a lot of details like what are some of the things we can do with the combination of Power Automate and Microsoft Graph. But my idea is to my goal is to give you enough ideas or how to do it so that you can play with some advanced scenarios as well. So the idea, the application is going to be very simple where for example, in your organization, you have turn off the team's creation for everyone. That means only selected users can create a team. However, you would like to have a application which your users can use whenever they need a new team. So we will have a form that user need to submit, and that form can be created using Office 65 forms. You can use SharePoint for that. You can use Power Apps, or you can use the third-party products as well. Uh, so when it comes to the third party products, or if you're using, let's say, a custom ASP.NET application, as long as the information regarding your team you're storing in a data store, and that data store is accessible via Power Automate, we should be able to use that. For example, let's say you're not comfortable using Office 65 Form or SharePoint or Power App, but you are really good in ASP.NET development, or you are really good a React developer. In that case, you can build your form in React or ASP.NET. However, the key information, like some of the key information that you need to create a team, then you can store in some of the data stores that are available that we can consume through Power Automate. And that can be the Azure SQL, or that can be a SharePoint list, or that can be a Dataverse as well. And then once the user submit a form, then it goes through approval. And if it's approved, then we use Microsoft Graph APIs and then create teams with proper naming convention. So the design is very, very simple. Now, when it comes to automatic provision of teams, we have variety of options available. And depending on your choice of technology or depending on your comfort level, you can use any of these options. The option number one is you can use the combination of Flow plus Microsoft Graph APIs. However, to use this, you need a Power Automate premium license. You can use combination of Flow, Microsoft Graph API, and Azure Function. Now, some cases we need to use Azure Function, especially if you would like to create some additional automation, which will be difficult to just do in the context of Flow. Again, to use this, you need the Power Automate Premium subscription, and to use Azure Function, you need Azure subscription. The third option is the combination of Flow, Microsoft Graph APIs, and Azure API apps. For this also, you need the Power Automate Premium license and Azure subscription. The fourth one is you can use combination of Logic apps and Microsoft Graph API. And for this, you only need Azure subscription. Now I will talk like why we need to consider Logic apps in some cases. And same way, we can use combination of Logic apps, Graph APIs, and Azure functions. Again, we can replace Azure function with Azure API app. For some reason, if you don't have access to Power Automate Premium license and you also don't have access to Azure, and trust me, I have seen some companies where, especially some departments where they cannot get both. They cannot have access to Power Automate Premium license and they cannot have access to Azure. You can still do automatic provision of teams. However, I don't recommend this approach where you can use PowerShell, and using PowerShell, you call Microsoft Graph API, or you can use a C# console application, and through that console application, you call Microsoft Graph API and create the teams. The last two options I don't recommend, but in case you don't have any other option, that means you don't have access to Power Automate and you don't have access to Azure subscription, you can consider those last two options as well. So in this talk, I will be covering the combination of Flow plus Microsoft Graph API and the combination of Logic Apps and Microsoft Graph API. So I know majority of you are already familiar with what Microsoft Power Automate is, but if you are one of those who has not heard about this product, then this is just a 2-minute introduction. So Microsoft Power Automate is part of Microsoft Power Platform. And if you look at the description of Power Platform, it's a low code platform that spans Office 65, Azure Dynamics 65, and other standalone applications. And Power Automate is used for automation. We also have Power Ops apps for application development, Power BI for business analytics, and Power Virtual Agent for the chatbots. And we also have Power Apps portal where we can use public facing portal. We can infuse AI using AI Builder, and everything that we do in Power Automate or in Power Apps, the behind the scene, all the data gets stored in Microsoft Dataverse. And when you create a Power App or Power Automate, we can also use Dataverse as a data store. But we also, along with that, we also have other options available. So this is the mission statement from Microsoft on Power Automate, where people should only have to focus on tasks where they can bring unique human value. And these are some of the value pillars of Power Automate, where if you create a Power Automate and you set that the Power Automate should start whenever a new record get added, then you don't have to worry about the scale. That means if suddenly 100 or 200 records get added in your data store, then Power Automate can scale automatically. It provides you a secure integration. It helps you to accelerate productivity. And also we can implement intelligent automation using Power Automate. There are more than 300 connectors there where you can integrate with Power Automate. And we have tons of templates available. So my one little tip here regarding templates is, if you are totally new to Power Automate, it's a good practice to start with templates. Do you see how the different kind of automation scenarios can be built? But once you get comfortable, try to not use templates. And I have my own reasons for that. The reason is, whenever the template gets created, let's say they use the version v1 of a particular action. And if the version v2 is out there, that template may or may not get updated with the latest version of the action. So my recommendation is if you can have two screens, then on one screen you can have a template. And in the second screen, you just start from the blank and then try to mimic the same steps over there. So there is a question from regarding the YouTube recording. I am pretty confident that most of the session recording will be posted on the Power Community YouTube channel because I have seen same thing happening with the previous conferences as well. So now let's talk about what is Microsoft Graph API. So Microsoft Graph API is a gateway to the data and intelligence in Microsoft 365. And it offers a single endpoint, which is graph.microsoft.com. Now, for some of you who are not familiar with Microsoft 365 or Office 365, this may be totally new. But just to give you the context, before this Graph API was there, if I am writing a program, or if I'm using, let's say, a product like Power Automate, and now I have to use a specific service-specific API, and that service can be Exchange, where your email reside, or Teams, or SharePoint, or OneDrive. Without Graph API, I had to know the individual endpoint of each service, and then I need to know how to make that call to that service, what kind of information I have to pass, what kind of access token I had to pass, and then what kind of response that will come back. I had to then keep track of everything. Like, let's say if I'm building an application where I need to interact with emails, I need to interact with OneDrive files in OneDrive, I have to interact with calendar. That means as a developer or as a Power App, a Power Automate builder, I had to then consider like different endpoints. What Microsoft has done is they added on the top a single endpoint, which is graph.microsoft.com. And depending on which service you're requesting, you just had to add the specific information of that service in this at the end of the URL. So that way you don't have to worry about individual endpoint URLs. So everything is isolated from you. Behind the scene, if I make a call to, let's say, email through or to exchange the Graph API. Behind the scene, the Graph API itself will call the individual exchange API. However, I as a developer or I as a Power Apps Power Automate developer doesn't have to worry about that. So when it comes to the Graph API, it exposes the REST APIs and client libraries, and we can access data that is there in different Microsoft 365 services like Delve, Excel, Microsoft Bookings, Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, OneNote, Exchange, Planner, SharePoint, Workplace Analytics. When it comes to enterprise mobility and security services, we can access data regarding from the Azure Active Directory, Identity Manager, and Intune as well. And you can also access the data from Windows 10 services and from Dynamics 365 Business Central as well. So before I start with the demo, I want to quickly give you a 2 to 3 minute overview of the Microsoft Graph APIs. So for that, use your favorite a browser and just search for let me see, the zoom is right. Yes. And just search for Microsoft Graph API. And here, the first link that you will get is from docs.microsoft.com. Click on that. So here you will see a really good literature on what these Graph APIs are, how to consume those. And I know that when it comes to the Power Automate, the audience that you'll get, some of you may be developers, some of you may be Power users. So even if you are a Power user, still you can use Microsoft Graph API. There is a lot of samples available. So just don't get a feeling that I'm a Power user and this API may not be for you, may not be for me. That's not the case. So here you will see good information about what kind of operations we can do. But one thing which is my personal favorite, and I wish pretty much every uh, product offering companies will do that, is this Graph Explorer. So this Graph Explorer is a really good tool. So if you go onto that page, so click here on Graph Explorer, which is on the top right section of the page. And what it does is it gives you a sample application, which is open source and which is created by Microsoft, which you can use to try out these various APIs. And by default, all these APIs calls are available to you, which are working from a demo tenant. But here you will see this option where you can sign in with your own Microsoft 365 account and you can run these APIs against your own data as well. So you know what kind of call I had to make once the call is successful, what kind of information is coming back in the form of JSON so that you can use for later use. And if you scroll on this left hand side towards the bottom, you will see some predefined a sample as well. And if you expand on applications, you can see like there are some samples available for SharePoint, for Planner, for Outlook, and you can also build your own request as well. So for example, if I would like to see what will be the Graph API call to get my profile information, then I just click on get here and you will see here the URL gets added here. So the endpoint URL is graph.microsoft.com/version, which is 1.00 and then me. And this is going to be the request, which is a get request. And in this format, the data will come back. And again, this data is coming from a demo tenant. But if let's say if I would like to make this call against my own tenant, then I just have to click on this sign in Graph Explorer. And if you are doing it for the first time, then you just have to provide the consent. OK. Otherwise, once you log in with your credentials, then you can just start executing these queries against your own tenant's data as well. So as you can see now, I'm logged in using my Office 365 tenant, and then I can execute this query. So if I go to get my profile and do run query, then it will bring the information regarding my account from the tenant where I logged in. I personally use this Graph Explorer a lot whenever I need to try out a new Graph API, especially when it comes to trying out API in the context of Power Automate, because this way I can quickly find out what kind of call I had to make, what kind of request information, what kind of request headers I had to pass, and then in what format the JSON will come back. Now, when it comes to the creation of teams, right? So when it comes to the teams, if you look into this Microsoft Graph API's homepage, on the left hand side, you will see the different types of the APIs that are available. So if you scroll down here, so if you see here, we have the APIs available for groups, the calendar, the files, the mail, and the teamwork. So if I expand the teamwork here, and if I click on the overview, then you will see a really good tutorial from Microsoft. There is a YouTube video. And if you scroll down here, like these are the various things we can do using the Graph APIs. And now let's say I'm interested creating a new team. Then how I can do that? What kind of what kind of API I had to do? So in this example, we have the available to us is creating a team from a group. But what if I would like to just create a team, a brand new team where the group is not there? So this is the page you will go, and here you will find information like what kind of permission you will need to execute this API, and what kind of HTTP request it will be. So it will be a post request, and what kind of authorization we need, and when it comes to making the request, how you can make the request. So example number one is for the delegated permission. Then example number two is for the application permission. Now in few minutes, I will explain to you what is a delegated permission and application permission. But the important point to note is this one. So this is going to be your request a body. And if you see there are multiple tabs available. So the by default it's set to HTTP, and that's the one we'll be using for inside Power Automate. Then if you click on C#, JavaScript, there is Objective-C and Java as well. But what we're interested is in HTTP because that's the one we will be using inside the Power Automate. All right, now with that, so that was a 2-minute overview of that. So I want to pause here and see if anyone have any question before I start jumping into the implementation and show how everything is done. All right. Looks like there are no questions here. So let me quickly show you the form I created. Again, I have used SharePoint. In case you're not familiar with SharePoint, it's okay. You can use any other form technology like Microsoft 365 forms, or you can use Power Apps, or even you can use custom ASP.NET or Angular form, provided you are storing that data somewhere. So what we are interested is in giving a user what we are interested is giving a user a mechanism to provide the team's information. And once they submit, that data should go somewhere where we can use that data for in our Power Automate. So in this case, I have used SharePoint where if I click on a new, I'm just providing some basic information. Again, this is a very crude example, and just to give you an overview of what can be done. And using this information, then you can implement some advanced scenarios where first I will be doing is I will be in like what kind of name I will need for the team. So let's call it as Power, or let's call it as a Global Automation Bootcamp. And the purpose is Global Power Automation Bootcamp, and let's call it as a marketing. And the department that it is going to be is for marketing. And here you will see I have a drop down here automation scenario, and by default its value is Microsoft Flow. And if you see, if I expand this, I have the other options available, which is Microsoft Logic App. Now I will come to this later, but by right now, let's go with Microsoft Flow here. And once I submit this, a flow will start, which will basically first will be doing approval. And if the request gets approved, then we will be using Microsoft Graph API to create this team. Now let's go to the flow UI and quickly see the implementation of this flow. And again, one little tip I would like to share with you is when you go to Flow UI, your flows will be categorized below between cloud flows, desktop flows, business process flows, and shared with me. Uh, if you see anything under cloud flow here, and it's only you are using it, and you know for sure, you know nobody else needs to know about this flow, it's okay. But if you are building something and you know it's going to be used by at your work, or your other people should also be aware of that, then make sure you add share that flow with your team members, so that way when you are not available, they can go ahead and change or do some changes in the flow. So I'll be going under shared with me. And this is where I have created this flow called SP team request approval. And here again, one little tidbit regarding the naming convention. So use a proper naming convention when it comes to naming the flows. And those naming convention can vary depending on your organization or your personal choice. But having a naming convention helps. For example, here I always start with a trigger. What kind of trigger it is. Since this flow is tied up with SharePoint, I start with SP and then what exactly its purpose is. So that way, by just looking at the name, I can know, okay, what this flow is integrated with and what its purpose is. So let's go ahead and click edit. Okay, it's taking more time than usual. Okay, so the trigger is very simple. Whenever a new request is submitted, this flow gets started. Now you'll see three variables which are getting initialized after this. Now let's talk about that, why we need these three variables. Again, if you go back to the create team, and if you go onto this page, you will see the permission information, like what kind of permission you need to execute this particular API. Now, when it comes to the Graph APIs, right? So to use Graph API, you need to have a proper permission, and Graph APIs are hosted somewhere. Your Power Automate is going to be hosted somewhere else, like in different infrastructure or let's say in pure layman's term, in different servers. Now, how these two will then talk with each other, how they can know that okay, the request it's coming from a genuine party and not from some hacker. So the way you do that is through registering your application in Azure Active Directory. And the way to do it is you just have to go to portal.azure.com and then register an app. And you may have seen these steps previously as well in other session. But since this session is going to get recorded, and if someone is watching this session and didn't watch other session, then at least they should know what kind of steps they have to take here. So I'm going to go to the steps one by one. So first thing first, we need to go to Azure Active Directory and then register the app here. Then click in the left hand navigation, click on app registration. And for some of you, this may sound very complicated, but don't worry. What you can do is if you're not comfortable working with Azure Active Directory, you can just tell your IT admins like, hey, give me register an app and give me just three key information. And then that way you don't have to touch even Azure Active Directory, because trust me, getting access to Azure Directory is easier said than done in a lot of organizations. Then click a new registration here. And then let's give it a name. So let's call it as global automation bootcamp, and it's called Teams creation. And then you have option what kind of account you would like to support, whether you would like to support account only from your organization Active Directory or from multi tenants, or not only multi tenants but other Microsoft accounts like the Skype account or Hotmail account or live.com account, or only Microsoft personal account. Since this we're going to use this application to create a new team, I will be using the first option, which is accounts in organization Active Directory only, and then click register. And once it's registered, then there are some key information that we need to note it down. The first is application ID or client ID. So keep note it down into in this case, I'll be using a notepad here real quick. Then note the directory or tenant ID as well. And the third, which is most important, then you need to go in the left-hand navigation to client certificates and secrets here. And then the recommended authentication option is through certificate based authentication, which is more secure. But again, it takes more time to configure as well, and it's a little bit complex. If you have to do registration real quick, then or authentication real quick, you can do that via client secret as well. So I will go with client secret for the sake of this demo. Click on new secret, and then you can give it a description. Teams app. And you can also note down the expiration value. So I personally don't like selecting never because that means if this secret is out there and I forgot about this, and for some reason if someone gets access to this, then that means I'm exposing that particular I'm exposing the data from my Microsoft 365 tenant for unauthorized access. So here I will be going with 1 year, but you can use 2 years depending on what's your preferences. And then once you create that, the value of your client secret will get displayed here. Now you will have very few limited opportunities available to copy this value, because once you get out of this page and if you start browsing to other section of your Azure Active Directory, you may not be able to see that value. And only way to do that is in then generate a new value. One thing I really want to highlight is when it comes to the Azure, right? When you create anything in the Azure, always check the quick start menu into that specific service or application. Like, for example, if I click the quick start, here you will see sample application from Microsoft where how you can use this application and start creating custom application using custom code here, like .NET, Node.js, and then there are mobile desktop application, how you can create single page application and how you can create a daemon application. But as far as our demo is concerned, we were interested in the application ID, the directory ID, and the secret. We got that. Now the next one is we need to worry about the permissions as well, like this particular thing. Now when it comes to permission, we have two types of permission. One is the delegate and second is application. Now delegate means if I create something, let's say if I'm running, if I'm submitting a form and that form from that form, if I'm calling the Microsoft Graph API and I am using a particular application and the permission I have configured for that application is the the application itself can read and write all the site collections. However, I as a user has access to only one particular site collection or one particular record, then the delegate permission will use the minimum of the two, which is that means if I am running this app or this particular Power App, then I will have the permission which is common of those two, that application permission plus the permission I have. Whereas if you go with application permission, that means whatever permission you assign to the application, then your app will use that. And typically use application permission when your application is running in the background without a user interface or interference. So in our case, we will be using application permission because we would like to create a new team using Microsoft Power Automate, and that will be running in the backend. So for that, let's go to our Azure Active Directory and click on the API permission here in the left-hand navigation. And once you click on that, here you will be seeing by default the application has user read. But if you click on add permission, then you will see most commonly used applications in Microsoft which are available to us. Like first one, we have Microsoft Graph, but if you scroll down, we have various applications available in Microsoft ecosystem like the Flow service, OneNote, SharePoint, Yammer, and also some other APIs available from Azure as well. So in our case, I will be interested in Microsoft Graph, and then I will be selecting application permission for this case, and then uh, we can just quickly find out just this particular these permissions, where you can just go here, quickly search for that, and expand that, and then Teams create, add a permission. Similarly, you can add additional permissions as well. And once you add the permissions, it's up to you whether you would like to grant admin consent. So since I am admin here, I'm getting that option. Now, depending on where exactly you are using this and how much trust you have in this application, you may or may not want to click this button. In this case, I'm going ahead with the admin consent. That way, the whoever is using this app, they won't be getting that prompt again to trust or to trust this app and then assign the appropriate permission. So we are done with all the configuration we have to do in the Azure Active Directory. Now let's go back to the flow. Now the number one question you may be asking, or you should be asking, is why I need to use Microsoft Graph API. Because if I go inside the Power Automate, and if I click on add, and if I click add action, and if I search for the Teams, and if I select the Microsoft team, then there is already an action available which is under preview called create a team. Why don't I use this as compared to the Microsoft Graph API? And that should how you should be using the products like Power Automate, where if something is out of the box, then you should be using that as compared to calling your own APIs for that. So so the reason we are not going to use this is, number one, this action is under preview. And if you expand this, you'll see the only thing we can specify is what's the team name, what's the description, and whether its team is going to be public and private. But we cannot specify other things, but that is a template. Like if I had to use a specific template, I cannot do that. So that's why we are not going to use this out of the box action here. So let's go ahead and delete it. So first thing we have is we have three variables. In each variable we have application ID, then a directory ID, and then we also have client secret. And here I have a checkbox, and again this checkbox is for my demo only. So what I'm doing is, whenever a request is submitted, I am just checking what's the automation scenario I would like to use, whether it's Microsoft Flow or whether it's a Logic app. So in this case, if I go with Microsoft Flow, then a simple approval is starting, and upon the confirmation, if the request gets approved, then we are making two calls. One is to the get user profile, where whoever is submitting the request, we are passing their email address and getting some additional information regarding their user profile regarding that user from the user profile store. And the information that we are interested is in its unique identifier, or UPN. And the next thing I'm doing is I'm making a call to the Graph API. And to make the call to the Graph API, you have to use this HTTP action. And the method I'll be using is post. And now how I will know what kind of method I have to use? Just go to this particular page and then find out. So here, this is the post method. That's why I use post. Then in the request body, what kind of permission I'll be selecting. Since our will be running in the backend, we cannot use that. We'll be using the application permission. And to use the application permission, this is going to be the URL of your Graph API, which is going to be graph.microsoft.com, then version/teams. So if you go back to the flow, this is the one we have used. And then in the body, this is the information we have to provide, where in the display name, display name can be variable, the description can be variable, and the user who's going to be owner can be variable. And you can see here you'll find the format, like in what format the data needs to be. The user information needs to be the UPN, which is user's unique ID. So that's why we have used this particular action, where we get the unique ID of the user, and that's where we use and the owner. And in the display name, we can use our own naming convention, like the name of the team can start with the department and title, and then in the description you have purpose. And then once the team is created, then you are just updating that particular request saying the state is approved, the teams is created, and then you can do a bunch of additional steps here. Now let's quickly take a look at the approval here. And so this request is for my approval, and I'll just quickly take action on that. Looks good. And confirm. So if everything is fine, right with the flow, then a new team should get created using the Graph API. So for that, let's go to the My Flows and quickly see if the request is completed fine or not. Okay, so looks like it is succeeded. Um, And if I go to my Teams client, which is this one, I should be able to see a new team with a global automation bootcamp name. However, the name will start with marketing as a prefix. So let me refresh this. And you can see here the team is there now. And it is using the standard template because that's a template we have used when we made the request to the Graph API. And there you can specify other values as well. But in this case, we went with the standard. All right. Things a little bit slow at my end, so I apologize for that. And that's why it's taking a long time to load. All right. So this one was successful. Let's go back to the edit flow here. And one thing I want to show you before we address any questions you may have, because I know we are running out of time as well. So let me expand this real quick. And so one thing you will notice is here, if I try to go and add HTTP to call the Graph API. Yes, that's correct. The flow gets triggered whenever I submit a request in the SharePoint. So if I go to the HTTP, so one thing you will notice is HTTP is a premium trigger. That means if I am using Microsoft or Power Automate through the license of Office 65 or Microsoft 65, I may not have access to this. And to use HTTP, then I had to go with the premium licensing for the flow. I may have to go with per user license or per app license. And for some reason, if you cannot get both, then we can have other option available. We have other option available to us as well, which is a Logic Apps. So not many people know, but Microsoft Flow is actually built on the top of Logic App. And Logic App is a workflow engine for Microsoft Azure. It's built on the serverless principles. It can, just like Flow, it can scale up automatically to meet the demand. And just like Flow or Power Automate, we have a lot of connectors available. It begins with a trigger. So if I had to give you a visual representation of how these two products are connected, so Azure is Microsoft public cloud offering, and Logic App is their workflow engine. And Power Automate is actually built on the top of Logic App. When Power Automate first came into existence, pretty much everything that we could do in Logic Apps, we could do with Power Automate as well. But over the period of time, now the Power Automate has matured. It has added some additional functionality, which is only available with Power Automate. That's why you see the overlap of the feature is like the small, but still there is a good overlap between these two products where depending on your scenario, you may choose to use one over another. For example, in Power Automate, business process flows, UI flows, and additional approvals like SharePoint approvals are available, which are not the case with Logic Apps. However, the example we showed, in case you don't have access to HTTP action because it's a premium action, you can implement the same business logic using Microsoft Flow. Again, I won't be showing you the demo, but this is the logic app I have created. If I go into the edit into this logic app, uh, here the look and feel wise, everything will look pretty much the same to you. And again, I apologize. There is some really funky thing going on my machine. That's why everything looks like running very slow. All right, come on. All right, so same concept here. We have a trigger where whenever new item is added to the SharePoint list, start that. Then initialize all the variables related to the Azure Active Directory application. Then in the condition, in this case, we are specifying whether I would like to use Logic App or not, because I don't want to create the same team using two options simultaneously. Otherwise, I will get error depending on which one get executed first. And then here, instead of SharePoint approval, we are using the send approval email. So that's the difference you'll see. But after that, once the request gets approved, we are using the same kind of actions like get user, where we are getting users unique ID from the Active Directory, and then using the HTTP to basically make the call to the Graph API and create the team. Now, one thing I did not show you in the example of Flow is where exactly you will be using the information about the Azure Active Directory application that we just registered, right? So if I expand this, and if I go show advanced option, so here you need to specify what kind of authentication you would like to use when you're calling Graph APIs. So we are going with Azure Active Directory OAuth, and then the name of the tenant information, client ID, and client secret. And using this information, then the Graph API will know that, okay, the request that is coming from Microsoft Flow is actually coming from genuine party, and then they will go ahead and execute that request. I know we lost like few minutes in the beginning, so I'm running a little bit behind. So with that, I am coming towards the end. I will skip few things where there is option available in Flow where you can export the Flow as a logic app. And for example, for some reason, if you're not comfortable using Azure, you can request your admins to create. You can give this package to your admins, and your admin can then create export your Flow as a logic app and then give you the control, and then you can then just focus on only adding the steps in your logic app and executing those properly. I get this question a lot where, okay, I'm new to Power Platform and I really need my own environment where I can try out Microsoft Flow, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agent, Power BI, and other areas. Then this is the link you can go. There is a really good program available from Microsoft called Microsoft 65 Developer Program, where if you sign up, you can sign up for free. You get a personal Microsoft 65 tenant with E5 subscription. And right now it comes with 25 users and the validity is 90 days. And it comes with Power Automate, Power Apps, Power Virtual Agent as well, and a Power BI free version, and along with other Office 65 offerings like Exchange, Teams, SharePoint. And if you are using this tenant for your personal development, then Microsoft will graciously increase your trial period for additional 90 days. I'm personally using the tenant from this program from last 1.5 years. So you can imagine, as long as you keep using it and this program is active, you'll have a personal dedicated environment with 25 users with E5 license. And when it comes to the premium features of Power Automate or Power Apps or other Power Platform products, you can always request for the trial using this tenant. And as long as you are not using those premium trials for production, you're only using for testing, I think Microsoft sometimes also extend your trial period for additional duration as well. These are the way you can get the personal Azure subscription, because to use Logic Apps, you need Azure subscription. So hopefully the contents covered we today made you excited about some of the automation scenarios we can build when it comes to the Microsoft Teams. So these are the things we covered today. With that, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for staying from last 1 hour. And these are my contact details in case you have any future questions. So I'm available on Twitter. I'm also available on LinkedIn, and I will be posting this information in the chat window as well. And I know the next speaker is available ready. And I know we had some technical slack in the beginning, so I will cut short here. So if you have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat window and I will answer those in the chat so we can start the next session on time. With that, thank you very much. Thanks for coming and stay safe and stay healthy.